I'm James McGregor, publisher of the Silicon Valley San Jose Business Journal. And on behalf of our title sponsor, U.S. Bank, I'd like to welcome you to our Energy Summit. This fall, California voters will be asked to vote on Proposition 23. A vote for Prop 23 would suspend AB 32, California's landmark climate change law. Silicon Valley is at the heart of the clean tech industry. And opponents of Proposition 23 say that a vote for Prop 23 would derail the investment and the jobs needed to grow the industry. Proponents of Prop 23 say that now is not the time to add additional costs to business. We have an outstanding panel of speakers. We look forward to your feedback, and on behalf of our title sponsor, U.S. Bank, enjoy.
Thank you, James, and thank you, everybody that's here for this wonderful panel. Thank you to the panel. I'd like to start out with a question for the full panel, and I'll start with Dorothy. Much of the impetus for AB 32 and California's energy policies has been based on scientists who predict global calamity if measures aren't taken to reduce global warming. Do you believe they are correct?
Actually, I don't know, because I'm not a scientist, and the Manufacturers Association doesn't have a position on this. But whether it's true or not, it's a good idea to become much more efficient in how you use energy, just for bottom line reasons as well as for environmental reasons beyond or other than climate change. And that so far as Prop 23 is concerned particularly, there really isn't any dispute that the emission reductions that we would be getting under AB 32 wouldn't make any difference in climate change in any event. So there isn't any real connection between the emission reductions in California that we'd be achieving and whether there'd be a change in the climate.
Brian?
Nanosolar is a solar panel manufacturer, so we don't assess climate change science.
Anthony?
Okay. So I think maybe a couple different ways to answer the question. First, I agree with Dorothy's comment about the additional benefits associated with energy efficiency. But in terms of the science, if you look at some of the subsequent evaluations of, for example, the IPCC reports that were done after the climate gate that I'd mentioned previously, they've pretty much all come to the conclusion that the science is sound, that the impacts that the models are predicting, we're already seeing the effects of climate change on the ground, and that it is going to get worse. For people who are sort of scientifically minded and also skeptical, one website I typically tell them to go to is one called realclimate.org, and this is basically the scientists. And if you think sort of this is just a cabal and they all kind of agree with each other and they're pushing this particular notion that human-induced climate change is a bad thing, go to that site and you'll find some of the most contentious, argumentative, debates that you've ever seen, constantly debating the science, constantly trying to refine the models and the understanding of the science. But if you spend a little bit of time on there, you'll find that the one thing that sort of repeatedly they come back to is this conclusion that the human contribution to climate change is real and it's having an impact, and that impact will grow into the future. One other just quick comment, this idea that California can't contribute to the solution on its own. Absolutely we need national policy, absolutely we need global cooperation in terms of addressing this challenge. But California can have a contribution, because climate change is based on a cumulative stock pollutant, CO2, that builds up in the atmosphere. Every ton emitted contributes to the problem. And B, California in so many different areas, environment, and I don't want to take time to list them, has demonstrated that through leadership we can create the pressure that ends up resulting in national policy to address these problems.
Dan?
Just to add a few quick things. First, I think indeed the science is well established. It's obviously a complicated area, but an awful lot of work has been done. So many reviews have been carried out, and I think it's sound science, and it's something that we certainly can act on, and countries all over the world are doing so from a policy and an investment standpoint. California, obviously the largest population in the country, the largest contributor among states. Its reductions will have impact. Will have impact from a technical perspective, and California, as we just heard from Anthony, is a model going back decades for energy and climate policy. And so if we fail in California, if we turn back AB 32 in the form of Prop 23, I think the modest likelihood of national legislation now will become even dimmer. And I think you can already imagine the refrain of Congress. If they can't do it in California, how can we expect to do it in Congress? And then lastly, the flip of all this, again, the upside, the economic opportunity around clean energy is just so extraordinary. This is something we need to be doing in this state. This is something we need to be doing in this country. We have a massive, massive market measured in the trillions of dollars that we will lose to China and to the EU if we don't make these kinds of moves that we've already put on the books in states like California and that we need to do nationally.
Dan, I'd like to stay with you for a moment. Can you explain why Google has a director of climate change? What's Google's interest in all this?
Well, you can always Google it and find out. And I actually know how to do that now. It's a great question, and it's not the first time I've gotten it. There's three quick answers. One is it turns out there's a fair amount of electricity use in the form of data centers all over the country and all over the world that sit behind those instantaneous searches that we've all come to rely on. Second, we have a group of engineers and other technical people who feel that we can actually, as a company with our expertise, contribute to the solution. So, for example, we've begun to develop a product called Google Power Meter, which gives people real-time information about their electricity use in their home, on their laptop, or on their smartphone. ET meets IT, energy technology meets information technology. And third, just as a company, beyond our focus in information technology, I think people are very committed to fixing this problem, and it's also a good place to put Google cash and make some money.
Thank you. Another question for the whole panel. I'd like to start with Anthony on this. AB 32 was passed in 2006. California's had some of the most aggressive energy policies even before it goes into effect in 2012. What's been the impact of that? What's already going on?
So in terms of, you're correct, the 2006 was the passage of the bill. 2008 was the publication of the scoping plan, and the regulations that are being adopted under AB 32 are really just now sort of underway with within the statute. It requires that they all be operational by January of 2012. That's when all of the policies will be in place. Maybe just to address one of the comments made by Dorothy as well, it is definitely more than the cap and trade program that would be affected if AB 32 were to be suspended. Certainly the low carbon fuel standard, the recently adopted renewable energy standard, the vehicle standards that were originally passed under a bill that was Senator Pavley, or then Assemblywoman Pavley, basically sunset in 2016, and right now ARB is working to push the vehicles requirements further beyond that under the auspices of AB 32. So there's a lot of different programs that would be directly affected by AB 32 if it were to be suspended, and I think even just the uncertainty that it could be has already created some challenges, I think, within those sectors. I think the other thing is, if you look back at the policies that have brought us to today, and you look at them on a number of different metrics, including the economic impacts to the state, I think you can say with some confidence that these have been beneficial to the state. It is true that we do have some of the higher rates for electricity rates in the country, and that partially that is due to our policies that favor clean energy. But in terms, people really more care about their bills. And if you look at how much we pay for electricity as a fraction of our economy, it's one of the lowest in the country. Our energy productivity, which is the amount of dollars we create per unit of energy is about 70% higher than the rest of the country. And one state that's often quoted as friendly to business, Texas, they pay about twice as much as a fraction of their economy for energy than we do here in California. So I think this whole concept that we can't be pursuing clean energy that's not consistent with economic growth and vitality, I think is really a false premise and a false choice.
Dorothy, could you add to what's already existing?
I would love to answer that. I'm looking at a chart that I can't show you because there weren't allowed charts, but it's my favorite chart. It talks about from 2007 to 2009, the state's growth in manufacturing capacity ranks last among the 25 most populous states and is far below the national average. So this is not something we made up at the California manufacturers. It's Site Selection Magazine. They do these national surveys. And they found that of all the states, per 1 million people, California had 3.7 new or expanded manufacturing facilities. Texas had 24.5. Missouri had 105. They are kicking our butts everywhere. We are not getting new or expanded manufacturing in the state. So our electricity prices are already high. Everything else is high. I've already said that. How are we going to get all of this economic growth that I'm hearing is going to happen if we keep on adding additional costs? Our costs are already high enough to incent the energy efficiency and clean technology development that we want. I'll bet you anything, if Prop 23 passes, we'll still have a director of climate change at Google. Does anybody in the audience think that they're going to stop what they're doing on clean technology or energy efficiency if Prop 23 passes? I'd like to see a few. Why? Does it not make sense for your business to do it otherwise? The risk of what? What? Well, one thing Anthony mentioned, and I think Dan did as well, the renewable energy standard, the RPS is already in existence up to 20%. It could pass via legislation to 33% and likely will. Low carbon fuel standard, climate change, those are really the big, cap and trade and low carbon fuel standard. You're probably talking about cap and trade as this sort of generalized, we've got to increase the cost of energy in the state in order to create this incentive for people to go out and adopt energy efficiency. But we already pay 53% more. Why do we need to pay more? You know what's going to happen if prices go higher? We're going to have more business flight, and we're going to achieve our emission levels simply through lower economic growth. And that's not going to incent anybody to buy any expensive technology. It's simply going to be leakage. That's what's going to happen if California does it on its own. That's why this is so dangerous to go forward, especially when we can't afford it and the economy is so weak.